Hi, I'm Joe.
And I'm Liz.
This is Joe's Table, where we talk about role-playing, game design, hobbies, project planning, world building, and all things creativity, including guitar.
And today, practice.
And cooking.
And crochet.
Foreshadowing.
And art.
Yeah.
Lots of art.
Practicing sucks, and I hate it.
Agreed.
Done.
Cool. And a podcast.
This is going to be, I guess, a little bit different of a podcast. We talked at the very, very beginning a little bit about, like, this isn't just going to be just role-playing game stuff. I feel like maybe we haven't really done very many, if any, like non-role-playing game podcasts so far. So combo breaker, right? Like, this is going to be kind of one of the first, if not one of the first podcasts that was not specifically about role-playing games. Today we're talking about practice and how we don't like doing that.
Nope.
It's not fun. It's not our favorite thing to do. And it's a eat your veggies kind of thing, I think, where you gotta do it in order to get better at the thing that you want to do. Obviously. I mean, you know, we're coming at this from the truism perspective of, like, practice makes perfect. Everybody knows that you don't just, like, suddenly acquire skills and get really good at a thing, and nobody's born a genius piano player. They're a genius piano player because their parents were making them play piano since they were 2 years old or whatever. That's the kind of worldview that we subscribe to, is that you're myelinating mental neural pathways. You have to build those connections and get the info into your head. You
got to put the hours in.
Yeah.
You've got to learn the things. You've got to get the muscle memory.
Right.
You have to build those pathways in order to get to where you want to be. It sucks.
It's hard.
I hate it.
The road to success is so frequently very long, and, like, just even looking at the map for how to get there can be daunting, to the point where you'll give up on the thing.
Yeah.
I think you were listening to me attempt to play the beginning riff of Come As You Are earlier, in case you couldn't actually catch what it was, which I would not blame you for. Obviously I've started trying to play guitar again. I've written a blog post about, like, me and my guitar playing, so refer to that. Links down in the doobly-doo. But, you know, I've picked it back up again, and I'm trying to kind of work my way back into it. And I'm finding the difference of that versus my art career very interesting. So I think that's part of the genesis of this episode, is, like, how come there are some things that we can practice, and how come there are some things that we can't? Yeah,
definitely. There's definitely a big difference between, like, what we want to practice, like what our brains are interested in wanting to do, and putting in those hours, and what just feels like a slog.
Right.
Even though we come at both of those, you know, we could come at the same thing knowing both are going to be a total slog. Right. One of them we're like, yeah, sure, let's do it. Like you and guitar right now, you're like, yeah, sure, I'm going to spend most of my Sunday practicing guitar. And then there's other things that we're just like, ugh.
Yeah, and then, like, tomorrow morning, I'm going to be like, you know, I should really sketch for an hour and a half before I start my stream. Guaranteed it's not going to happen. I literally, on my schedule, it says, my schedule used to say beginning art section sketching for an hour and a half. But, you know, kind of time goes on, and I'm like, well, you know, maybe I got some emails to check, and I'll get my stuff started and read about the next commission or whatever, and just never happens. I literally tried to, like, just sit down and do some practice, I think last weekend, was that? Or was that Wednesday? But I just sat down and I said, okay, I'm going to do 20 anime portraits to try to work on my anime face studies and stuff. And I got about 5 done. And I was like, yep, just not feeling it. And it sucks. I know that I need to work on all kinds of things, especially in my artwork, because people pay me to be good at that. And I know personally that I don't feel good at that stuff. And I know like deep in my soul that I need to be doing that practice, and I cannot bring myself to do it.
Yeah. There's no way to like incentivize yourself to do those things if you just really don't want to.
Right. And I feel really bad about that because I used to draw just for fun. You know, I used to draw because I wanted to show people what a character looked like in a D&D game, or because I just thought somebody's picture was really cool. I guess when I first started really drawing, I was probably looking mostly at comics, like American comics, like Witchblade and stuff, Top Cow type stuff, Darkness. And I really liked drawing all that monstery type stuff. And now I don't. You know, now I think I've turned the switch in my head so that it's like, well, drawing is work.
Yeah.
And I think that really sucks.
Yeah, and that's tough to get out of too.
Yeah, it's a really deep hole. I don't know how to, I don't even know what kind of ladder to build to get out of that hole. You know, like I've tried a bunch of stuff over the years. I've talked with people on the stream a lot about like, oh, here's how should we incentivize, we're going to make a pact, right? I've done this a couple of times with people on the stream. We're going to make a pact to like make strategies for practicing more and practicing better. And then they just fall apart. Yeah. I don't know how it's been going for other people, but for my end, it just sort of evaporates fairly quickly. And like, yeah, man, it's hard. You got to put the hours in. I know, like, and I guess the irony is that because I have been spending like an hour and a half every single day for like the last 2 years or something, just doing commission art, I've gotten really good at the kinds of commissions and paintings that I do in that thing. But like, I don't really get much better at the things that I'm not doing well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. How much of that do you think is like the fact that that's work playing into it rather than like drawing used to be something you did for fun and now it's like something you've monetized and it's a work thing?
That's a good question. And I mentioned that at the beginning, and I think it might be slightly less of like, maybe a better way to phrase it would be, rather than saying it feels like work, more like it's somebody else's work. You know what I mean? Like that I've done work for companies and I've done work for myself. And I'm getting to the point where I'm getting kind of bored with work for other people, for clients, right? And I think what has happened over the past 2 years of me working on commissions has just been like, I've gotten completely out of the habit of drawing for myself. I can't draw just for myself anymore because I don't know how to do it anymore. I'm like hyper focused on, I have to have a brief. I need to know what the character is. I need to know what the background is. I need to know their personality. What are they wearing? What's their equipment? You know, and it's like a very specific kind of thing.
And you don't want to have to write up briefs for yourself.
I don't know. Maybe I wonder if I should. I wonder if that would make it easier, you know, because one of the things, and I guess we'll kind of roll into the guitar thing too a little bit here. Obviously, the thing that we're trying to say with guitar and art, at least on my end, is that I'm practicing guitar like practically all the time now. I like practice in the mornings and then I practice in the evenings for like a half an hour both times, and then I spend like Saturday and Sunday, if I don't have anything else to do, plinking away at guitar and like reading about how, you know, crazy tabs work and stuff. And I don't really feel that same thing with my artwork anymore. I don't have that same kind of like drive and connection to be like, oh man, I really want to draw this thing.
Right.
Yeah, I think that there is definitely a difference in how I'm practicing guitar and how I try to practice art. And I just don't know what the difference is that makes it feel weird and like uncomfortable to do one rather than the other. What drives me to do to play guitar compared to drawing? And I feel like I was thinking about this a few days ago when I was doing that practice, when I was doing the anime face sketches. I was thinking to myself, maybe the problem is actually that it's pleasurable to play guitar. Like it's enjoyable because I'm receiving enjoyment out of that process, as opposed to when I'm drawing, I'm not I'm not happy with my drawing until way late in the process. And the practice process is start over from the beginning a lot. And so it's like, even when I'm playing shitty guitar, I'm still having fun. When I'm drawing shitty, I'm having like the worst time because I'm sitting there thinking I should be better than this. You know, I've got all these problems and hang-ups about it, and I just hate the way the thing looks. And maybe that's a bigger part of it necessarily.
The guitar, you know you're just beginning and you're just starting on things, whereas art, like, you have this higher expectation for yourself because you've gone to college for it and you've spent all of these years doing art, so you've got a different like expectation level approaching it than you do for guitar, where you're like, I just picked this up again, and I feel like I have an excuse to be shitty at it. I think that might play into it a little bit. Not necessarily that I feel like I have an excuse to be bad at guitar, but that I don't have an excuse to be bad at drawing. Like, I feel like when I sit down to draw a face, that should just come out. Boom. Like, come fully formed into existence. And that's not how it works for people. Like, I've seen a lot of people like Ross Draws or Jazza or whatever these YouTubers are, where they can like do a single piece and just like I knew a guy in college who would do this for anime portraits. Like, he would do them at conventions and just draw an anime portrait in ink and be done. But for most people, I don't think it works that way, right? Like, most people do a sketch and like refine. There's progressive refinement to it. So obviously that's the wrong way to think about it, but it's really, really deep in my head. And the whole try to enjoy sucking at something in order to get better at it thing doesn't sit very well in my head. What about you? So the things I practice on are a little bit different. Like, I'm definitely, I guess art is the biggest one for me. I've wanted to be a better artist for ages. And I think I fall into the trap pretty frequently of not acknowledging the art that I actually do and wanting to like do painting or do drawing, because I know so many people who are like really good at sketching and really good at, drawing things and, painting things. And like, I want to do that too.
You want to be a capital A artist.
And I'm like, my experience is more with things like photography and fiber arts and stuff like that, which I don't acknowledge as art. Like, it's not the sort of art, capital A, quotation marks, big, glowy font that I feel like I want to be. So I like go through these little periods of like, I want to try to sketch, and I want to like, try to sketch nature things, or I want to, do drawings or pick up painting or something like that, or learn watercolors. And I'm not great at it at all because I don't want to put it in the practice. I want to just be able to have my finished product right then and there. And I get really bummed when I realize that I'm going to need years to get to what I'm seeing in my mind. And maybe that's my photography experience kind of messing things up for me, because I'm so used to being able to take the picture and get the composition at least down exactly as I want to. I may have to tweak how I'm, worrying about lighting or, shutter speed, f-stop, all of that stuff like that I can do and that I can fiddle with, but I can get the composition right away. And so I've already got the image I'm thinking of in my mind right there and then. And so I think that kind of factors into art. I don't want to have to do the practice to get there. So
it's almost like, I guess the difference is like in photography, you get to skip rendering. And the rendering as an artist is the thing that takes all the freaking time, right? And I guess that's kind of interesting coming at it from my perspective, because I think for me, rendering is actually the thing that's fun. I like to paint, but I'm really bad at drawing, right? Like, so for me, getting to the part where I can just fiddle at painting and like scrub some colors and like mush everything together, that's the hard part, is getting to that point.
And like photography, I guess I hadn't even thought about this till just now. Like, I'm practicing photography all the time. I take pictures all the time. I take shitty pictures all the time. But that's like one of the secrets of photography is like, you take a ton of really bad pictures and then you have a couple of really amazingly good ones. And that's something like a lot of people don't realize, even at like the professional level, there's tons of bad pictures behind that one like amazing view that you have.
And I think that's part of art generally,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
that's what happens. That's why concept artists do hundreds of thumbnail sketches, is because they're looking for the one hit.
Yeah.
Right. And then if you can get the one hit, then you can polish that thing. And I think the same thing is true in a lot of different forms of art. But I think there's also the kind of that aspect of like, you're also, when you take that many photos, you're also practicing, right?
Yeah.
So the photos that you are taking, your shitty photos are getting better too.
Yep. Yeah, and definitely. And like for me, I find myself, because I love to do nature photography and especially macros of flowers and stuff like that. So I find myself coming back every year to photograph the same thing. So like when the violets come out in the lawn every year, you will find me like crouching down in the lawn taking pictures of violets, because I've been chasing for the past, I don't know how long, that perfect picture of violets. And I've gotten really close a few times, but I keep doing it and I keep working towards getting that perfect violet picture. Someday I'll get there. But if you ask me to like try to sketch the perfect violet picture and like exactly what I want and sketch it out, nope.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'll give up. I'll try for a couple of weeks and be like, okay, I'm going to buckle down and try to draw this out. And then I'll give up because I'll realize it's so much work. So, you know, two very different feels for, you know, two art things to try to get the same result.
Okay. Conversely, what are some things that we don't really feel the need to practice, and why? What about, let's start with you.
I think two things, and these kind of might kind of fall into the same sort of thing as photography for me, is cooking. I feel like I'm pretty good at cooking and I don't need to practice, although kind of I'm practicing every time I'm cooking, but you know, don't tell me that. It's fun. I'm going to keep doing it. So like I've been chasing a perfect seafood chowder recipe based on one that Joe and I had the restaurant out in New England at one point. So good. I think I'm almost there, and I've been practicing at it for a few years. Yeah, but it's not practice. It's just fun. Yeah. And crochet. I like to crochet. Every time I like approach a new pattern, I always like have that momentary frustration of like, what in the world do they mean by these silly little pattern markers and stuff? And like, I'm not familiar with this stitch. How do I do it? And then I pick it up and I do it and I'm fine. And like, hey, I've learned a new stitch, and it's not practice to me, even though I've like gone through an entire piece and technically practiced each and every stitch I've done. It doesn't feel like practice at all to me. I don't feel like I need to practice doing a stitch. I just learn it and do it. Right.
And for people who are not familiar, that means that you've done that stitch hundreds of times by the time you're done with that one thing, right?
Yeah, definitely, because you keep a lot of patterns, you keep repeating that same stitch over and over, or a series of similar stitches over and over and over, and you know, sequence to get the end result that you want.
That's sort of similar to how I've been learning riffs for guitar, is that there'll be some little segment of a song that's identifiable, and then I try to learn how to play that, usually with the help of either a tab or like a video or something. And then I can eventually I get past the like, I have no idea how this works, blurb, 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 blurb. And then eventually I figure it out and I can do it slowly. And then it's like, then I know that I'm just practicing to make the thing that I can do better. I don't know if you like feel like you have bad stitches when you're doing crochet, but that like I know that when I'm playing guitar, I'll have like a bad run of that riff, and then I have to just do it over again, and I just keep doing it and keep doing it.
Yeah, and that definitely happens in crochet, and luckily it's really easy to pull it out and undo it and then redo it correctly. So yeah.
For me, I think I have a couple of things that are almost identical to that in that category of don't practice. I don't feel the need to practice. For me, the first one is programming. At this point, I spend 3/4 of my day programming and 1/4 of my day doing art. And I don't feel the need to like sit down and do practice projects that aren't monetized, that have nothing to do with anything, just for the sake of programming, learning how to do a programming thing. I usually just muscle through, right? I'm like, I've got to get this thing done. How does this thing work? And then eventually I figure out, you know, how all the different little subcomponents and parts and pieces, and, you know, make it work. But what I'm not realizing is that is the learning process, right? Like that's the practice. And then the other thing for me that falls in that like exact same bucket, I think is the painting, is rendering. I like it. I like doing that part of the process, but I don't sit down to practice rendering, because to render anything, you got to have some drawing, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm never thinking about practicing my rendering, but I practice my rendering whenever I'm rendering. I'm always, you can't do it without doing it, Yeah. So I think those all fit into the same kind of bucket. It's just a thing that you almost enjoy doing it to the extent that you don't realize that you're practicing it, right? And I feel like with my guitar, that's almost the point that I'm at. Like, I feel like I've been using a website called Justin Guitar that I'm sure a lot of people who are trying to learn guitar are familiar with. That website provides a lot of utility for learning guitar, but I feel like if somebody took that website away from me, I would probably still sit around these evenings and fiddle with my guitar. I mean, I don't always use the website. Sometimes I'll just sit here and try to plink away at the blues and play my resonator guitar and be like, okay, how does this sound? Does this sound like crap? Okay, not this note. Got it, And I'll gladly do that for an hour and a half without like thinking about it. So yeah, I think those are, maybe there is some kind of difference in either in the thing that we're trying to practice or the way that we're thinking about those things that is putting it in one category or the other, right? Like, what is the actual difference between the objects in those two categories?
Right.
Because if we can take something from one category and put it in the other category, that's awesome. Like the secret to getting good at shit. You know what I mean? Like, that would be ideal. That would be amazing. What if I could trick myself into wanting to draw while we're sitting and watching TV in the evenings?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's why I bought a freaking Microsoft Surface. That was the whole point. The computer's named Sketchbook in the operating system. That's what it's for. And I can't even bring myself to do it. So yeah, maybe we need to figure that out. What is that? And I think we've hit a couple of things which are like, it seems like there are certain activities that are just enjoyable to do.
Yeah.
It seems also easy to look at a map for progress and realize how horrifically large the thing is that you're trying to accomplish.
So maybe part of it's breaking it down into smaller bites and saying, I'm going to practice this. I'm going to practice this. I want to focus on just drawing X or something like that. And
I feel like that's what Justin Guitar gives me in terms of guitar is like each of those, like his videos are broken up into like 6-minute little sub lessons. And each one of those is teaching you exactly one thing. Like, here's the riff for Nirvana, right? Or here's a strumming pattern. And you're just going to practice that one thing. I tried to do that with my sketch thing. I've set up a little sketch sheet that says, like, do this one thing 20 times. You can pick. It's got a little menu on the side where you can circle, like, I'm going to do gesture drawing, or I'm going to do master's studies or whatever. And then it has like a little tiny bit of instructions on how to do the thing. And I tried to outfox myself and I still can't talk myself into it.
Yeah.
What other problems do we have with this practicing thing?
I think for me, one of the big things is like barriers to entry. You're pretty familiar with this, but like if there's something in the way of me doing something, practicing something,
Absolutely.
Personally, I have a tendency to shut down.
Right.
So if I have to do a lot of setup or something's missing or broken, I'm liable just to be like, nah, whatever. I'm walking away. I'm frustrated. I'm done with it. So,
and that can, from my point of view, that can easily end up with not doing that thing ever again.
Yeah. Yep.
Because you've broken the rhythm, and once you break the rhythm, then you're out of the habit.
Yep, definitely. So I think that's why, like, I do prefer things like photography over, say painting a little bit more, is because I always have a camera around. And maybe this is because I come from a family of photographers. So there's always cameras around. So it's easy for me to do photography. I can always find something I can take a picture with. Whereas like painting, like I have to find the paper, the paints, the setup. I have to clean out the brushes afterwards. Like, You don't.
It's sort of an ordeal.
Yeah, you don't have to clean the paint out of your camera every time.
Or rather, you really shouldn't need to.
Yeah.
You've probably done something wrong if that's the case.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think for me, we've talked about the fear of failure. Like, I guess for people who are not familiar with drawing and practicing art, when you say fear of failure and you're talking about drawing or art, you're not usually meaning like, I feel like I'm going to be abjectly incapable of drawing the thing. It's more like I'm going to draw the thing and it's going to look so shitty and embarrassing that I will be literally embarrassed to have done it. And yeah, that shit is real. Like that happens to me frequently. I think the other thing that we have as a problem is like, and I think this was less apparent to me before I started getting back into guitar, but the lack of apparent progress, right? There's something really exciting about like learning a new skill to the point where you can see that you're learning something and that you can do a new thing.
Right.
This happened, I think this is weirdly goes back to when I was trying to learn radio. I had an application for learning Morse code, and I was like, okay, I'll just sit here and play this app on my phone and I'm learning Morse, right? And it was really, really cool and exciting to feel like I'm learning. I'm like learning a thing bit by bit, right?
Yeah.
Now I know how to do O's. Now I know how to do S's. Now I know what the difference between N and M is. Which I've promptly all forgotten. But I feel the same thing when it comes to guitar, right? Like I can sit down and learn a riff. Like I could probably learn a riff in an afternoon if I really sat down and busted my ass over it and then be able to play it. That is way, way more progress than I can see sitting down for that same amount of time and drawing.
Right.
Because the very next drawing that I do, it seems, has exactly zero benefit from the previous 5-10 drawings or whatever that I did. It can be completely garbage compared to what I did before. So it's like the same effect as the photography where it's like you're going to hit, you're going to miss. There's, you got to accept that you're going to miss more than you hit. And when you put like 6 hours into a piece and then it comes out shit at the end, it's like, okay, yeah, maybe I'll do better on the next one and spend another 6 hours trying to do the thing to some standard.
Right. The amount of time that you have to put in is suddenly prohibitive, you know, because that's a lot of effort. That's a lot of time to have a result that you don't want.
It's extremely daunting to think, well, this could suck, right? And I think as a side note on that, there are a lot of artists who, I mean, I think probably most artists know that you need to practice probably more than you're actually executing your work.
Yeah.
I'm completely the other way around now because like I said, I can't practice anymore. My practice is doing the execution now. So my practice is exclusively doing all these illustrations for other people. And that's pretty nerve-wracking by itself.
Yeah.
Because I don't ever, like, I'm forcing myself to hit every time because I have to do the thing for this person. And then I can look at them later and be like, yeah, I really bombed this one. I only thought that I was doing well at this.
Right.
One other thing I did want to mention is, like, I think a lot of things that we practice like this, that we have resistance to the practice, it's not so bad once you're actually doing it.
Right, yeah.
You could, like, if I'm sketching, most of the time, once I start drawing, I'm like, I'm gonna draw. You know, I'll draw for however long I'm supposed to draw.
Yeah.
Or I'll draw and I'll try to draw the entire piece, whatever it is, even if if I was not feeling it before. And I guess part of that might be like a certain level of professionalism where it's like, okay, I'm able to say, okay, since I work for myself a lot of time, I'm able to say, okay, now is the time during which we draw. We're gonna draw now. We have to do the thing.
Yep.
Whereas I feel like the struggle is to get started.
Yeah.
Because that same thing happens with guitar, right? Like if I pick up the guitar and I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna practice this riff. It'll be 30 minutes later, and I'll be like doing something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe that, like, and I think a lot of people know that feel, right? Like I think that there's a trope of the blank page being the biggest threat.
Yep.
And so I guess that, find out how most people solve that, and then that would probably also be a advantage.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe don't start with blank pages. Have random patterns. Have a random pattern generator.
That's literally how some painters, especially digital painters, like to start. I think at least one guy that I can think of offhand, YouTube. I mean, he's on YouTube. He's more of a painter than I think he's a YouTuber. But Marco Bucci, who I really love his art style, he tends to start with like he paints in Photoshop and uses a bunch of texture brushes and just goes all over the screen.
Yeah.
And then he starts his painting based on that.
Okay.
Right? And then that gives him some texture to build off of. And there's there's various schools of thought about like, don't start with just a drawing, don't start with a sketch, start with some garbage and then, work through that.
Yep.
But like, I don't know, I guess I feel like I'm probably too much of an illustrator to make that work very well for me. Cause I think in terms of it has to look the way that the client wants it to look. And if I start from some weirdness, then it's really hard to wrestle it into position.
Even if the client is yourself and doesn't care about that. Yeah. Yep.
I wonder what that would be like if I just said I'm going to paint. It doesn't matter what I'm going to paint. I'm just going to paint.
Yeah.
And then started from some garbage.
Might be worth a try.
Okay, how else can we like try to convince ourselves to practice more?
Well, definitely lowering the barriers.
Right.
We talked about that a little bit. If we do have something we need to practice or we want to practice, making sure we've got everything ready, set to go. We know it's all there. It's accessible.
Yep.
So it's where we want to be. So it's in the living room or in the office or in the places that we spend a lot of time. I think that's helpful. So we don't have to go to a different room or a different part of the house.
Or get a thing in order to start a thing.
Yep.
Habits, I would say. That's how, I would literally probably not even be drawing at this point if it weren't for the fact that I had commissions that I had to do for an hour and a half every day, I probably would have waited, and I think this is what happened between when we did Oubliette and when we did HFA. I think there was a good portion of several months where I was done with Oubliette art and I was not drawing at all until we picked up HFA.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why I think that the art styles are so different, is because there was a huge section where right there where I just wasn't practicing. And so when I picked it back up again, I desperately had to like coin a new art style for that. And it was sufficiently different. So having a habit and being able to say, okay, every day, this is built into my schedule, this thing, which is whatever it is. And I guess the problem with that is like you have to decide. You only have so many hours in the day. What is it that you want to do? What do you want to spend your time doing? Yeah, that's an extra credit tough question.
Yeah, how do you allocate your time appropriately with everything else that you have to do?
I feel like that could be an entire podcast by itself.
That really could be. That also sounds like a very work way of phrasing it.
Right.
So yeah, thanks, business brain.
Time allocation in hobbies.
Ugh, there's a great way to suck all the fun out of it and make it boring.
I will now allocate 15 minutes to playing chords. Let's see, what else? How else can we practice more? I don't know how we would do this, but maybe we can try to find ways to like reduce the pressure, because there is like, especially for me for drawing, there's a lot of pressure about like, well, it's got to look good. It's got to be. And I guess maybe like part of this, I think I've kind of stumbled into, like since I do my commissions in the mornings for clients, I tend to stream every single one of those. So I'm always on basically TV trying to do my drawing, and that puts like an extra level of stress on it. So maybe just never practice my drawing while I'm on stream.
Yeah, just always do like stream is for commission work and stuff like that. And practice is always off stream yourself on paper, maybe. So there's no way it can be,
can't be traced back to me.
Yeah.
The files are not saved.
Yep. Yeah.
The pages can be burned.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a thing. Maybe I need to like start drawing for the sake of burning some paper and just say like, look, I need to get some pages. I have to have a sketchbook. And if I like a piece that I draw, then maybe I'll take a picture of it or something. But this is paper that I need to burn.
Hey, well, it's pretty cold out here in Wisconsin right now, so
it's like -5 right now or something.
Yeah, at time of recording. So we could burn some stuff. We should burn some stuff.
Better get drawing.
Yeah.
I guess that's a really like dark way of looking at it, but okay if it works. Let's see. And I think this has helped a lot with guitar, but like structuring the practice. This is a thing that I've tried so hard to do though for drawing. I can think of 3 discrete entire times when I've broken down all of art for the purposes of saying, okay, I'm going to start practicing this. Once I get good at this skill, I'm going to move on to this skill. I'm going to move on to this skill, and I'm going to build it back up. But like, maybe that is just part of how you have to do it, because like what I'm saying is maybe having the map is not a problem. It's just a step in the process.
Right.
Because otherwise you don't really know what you're doing or how you're doing what you should be doing, or whether you're doing the thing that you should be doing in order to get better at the thing. You're just kind of blindly doing, hoping that you're going to get better at something that is probably not the thing that you're actually doing. That was very confusing.
That was. I'm not sure I completely followed that.
I think I
know.
Followed that.
I think I know where you're going with it, though.
Like, it's very easy to practice a small segment of a skill. That makes it a lot easier and a lot more approachable. You need to make sure that you're practicing the right segments of the right skills, though. So, like, if I want to get good at drawing, I should probably not be writing.
Right.
Like, obviously. Right. But like, if the thing that I want to get better at is like drawing people's noses, practicing anime is not going to help.
No.
So,
unless you're practicing old school, like Escaflowne style anime, and then there's lots of weird noses in there. But
yeah, I suppose. Okay, now I have Escaflowne stuck in the back of my head. I'm going to have to learn to play that on the guitar, bringing it back around.
Yep.
But yeah, finding ways to kind of make it more structure it more rationally, I think would help.
Yeah. And giving yourself incentives to work through it. Help. Yeah. I think this is probably a bad example of that, because I struggle every year that we do NaNoWriMo, or NaNoWriMo, if you prefer to pronounce it that way.
Prefer to pronounce it correctly.
Yeah. I always promise myself something. I always promise myself some sort of a gift at the end of it for getting through a month of writing.
For succeeding.
Yeah. Even though I have a bunch of mental breakdowns along the way, and it's definitely not the best time, I get to the end of it and I give myself a gift just to say, hey, great, you got through it. Good job.
Endorphin hit. Good for you for doing that, for sticking through it, even though it sucked. Yeah. And I wonder if maybe we just need to give each other high fives. Maybe it breaks down to like giving each other endorphin hits for doing the practice. Like, know what each other's schedule is so that we can keep each other, not necessarily keep each other accountable, which I think would be negative reinforcement, but go for the positive reinforcement and be like, every time you succeed at doing the practice thing per day, you get a hug or whatever, right? And then like, or a pat on the back, or like head pats or something to be like, you did the thing. I'm proud of you. I know it's hard, but good job. You did it anyway. Yeah. That sounds like positivity that we need in the world these days.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Well, we're going to have to work out a head pat schedule then.
Yeah, totally.
I feel like this was probably a kind of pessimistic sounding podcast this time.
Yeah, I think so. But I think this is also something that a lot of people struggle with.
Right.
So it's a good thing to talk about. And I think it's also something that, like, from the outside, you don't see that. Like,
for sure.
And it's really tough if you're like following an artist or following a writer or, anybody out there, musicians. You see the end result.
Yep.
You see what happens after they've spent hundreds of hours putting that practice in. You're not seeing the tears and the struggling and the fighting and the depression and the anxiety that comes behind all of that. So I think it's really good to talk about that.
Yeah. And just the raw hours of like unappreciated practice that goes into a lot of that stuff. Like sometimes I've frequently actually struggled with the idea of doing like behind the scenes content for a lot of my different creative works. Like we've talked about doing blog posts or even a book about how to make RPGs, which would be sort of meta process, but like, but nobody really cares about that crap. You know what I mean? Like nobody really gives a crap about how hard it is to do the thing. They just care about the output of the thing.
Right. Yeah.
And only an extraordinarily vanishingly small segment of your audience, however big it is going to care about like, oh, how was that made? How did he do that? You know?
Right. Yeah.
And so like, if you don't have an audience of thousands of people, you have 0 people that are interested in how it was made. Right.
Right. Yeah.
And like, for me, I frequently think about that, and I think about like, nobody cares, you know, like that gets me like in the Nietzsche soul, you know, of like, like everything is meaningless because nobody cares, kind of like just gut stab, because people don't care until it's done, you know?
Right. And that's why I think it's so important to talk about practice.
Yeah.
And while this may have been a really pessimistic episode, I think it's good to get that out there, because there's other people in the same position that we're in. There's other people struggling through it going, like, I know I want to get there. I know I want to practice this, or I know I have to practice this, but I can't bring myself to do that.
Right.
And so I think it's really helpful to talk about that. And I think also for the other side of things, you know, for somebody who's just casually interested in, oh, that's a pretty, you know, piece of art, to know how much that goes into it.
Right.
You know, for example, I read at a really high rate, like
Absurdly high rate.
I read way too fast and I read way too much. And like, I feel really bad because you know, until I started writing, until I started doing NaNoWriMo, I didn't know how much went into a book.
Right.
And so now I know, and now I know how much like I struggle with that. Like, I cannot edit at all. I'm terrible at it. It gives me so much more respect for the authors I read, and also makes me feel really guilty when I like read through something that I know they probably spent like a few years on in like 6 hours or 3 hours or something. Like, oops, I'm sorry, but thank you.
Right. You almost feel like you are underappreciating it at that point, because you've consumed the fruits of their trials and tribulations so effortlessly.
Gulp. Gulp.
Right. Yes, the Liz shark that eats books. This is why we have a very large library, and why most of it is languishing in the already read that pile.
Maybe I already read that like 3 or 4 times pile. Yeah.
Let's not make a pact this time.
Okay.
I feel like maybe that would be counter to the less pressure on the practice angle that we discussed earlier. But so let's agree to try. Let's agree to try.
I think we should make a small pact though, which is more head pets, more good jobs, more, you know, hey, you did good sort of things coming out of this. And I think that would be good, but nothing more than that.
Right. Positive reinforcement rather than negative reinforcement.
Yep. Also, occasionally, here's a slice of chocolate cake.
Ooh. Or an entire bucket of soft pretzels.
Oops.
Well, I'm Joe.
And I'm Liz.
This is Joe's Table signing off. See you next time, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Peace. I just made that up.